Welcome to Wine for Normal People, the podcast for people who like wine, but not the snobbery that goes with it. I'm your host, Elizabeth Schneider, author of the Wine for Normal People book and certified wine dork. It's hard to find the perfect gift for the wine lover in your life, but I have a solution for you, the perfect pairing. Go to wineaccess.com/WFNP, buy a Wine Access gift card so the wine lover in your life can pick out whatever wines they want whenever they want them. And if they're super dorky and into wine, you can go to winefornormalpeople.com/classes, get them a class gift certificate. They can use those wines from Wine Access in the class. You'll be the hero of the holiday. winefornormalpeople.com/classes and wineaccess.com/WFNP. Listen in the middle of the show for more details. I hope everyone had a fantastic Thanksgiving holiday. For those of you who celebrate, we had a lively conversation on Patreon about what the pairings were. I had some fantastic pairings. I make my own tomato sauce and the garlic flavors with an Aglianico del Vulture by Elena Fucci, the Titolo, which I want to have her on the show. I'm going to try to do that next year. She is wonderful and her wines are spectacular, but it was a perfect pairing. My daughter loves stuffed shells, so I made some of that with tomato sauce, and it was spectacular. And then I had a Virginia wine, a sweet wine made from Petit Manseng in sort of an ice wine style. It's an interesting way that they make it, from Glen Manor Vineyards. And it went really, really well with a caramel apple pie that I made. Fantastic pairings. The two wine solution worked for me. It seemed to work for a lot of people on Patreon. I hope that the podcast was helpful for you. If you missed it for Thanksgiving, go back and take a listen. You can use it for Christmas too. And I cannot believe that this is our last in the series of the Greats of Bordeaux. Now, I know some of you have said, you really want me to continue on some other regions of Bordeaux. I'm happy to talk about other places in Bordeaux. But when it comes to the Greats, Pomerol is our final great in the series. Everything else is really great wine, but it is not considered to be a great. So Pomerol is the end of the line for us. More than anything, if I could make one wish, you are already wine dorks, you're already wine lovers. I hope that you get the impression or the idea that Bordeaux is completely doable. It's a little expensive sometimes not so expensive. Saint Estèphe has some really great priced wines, and that's still one of the greats. Pomerol, a little bit more expensive. Saint-Emilion, a little bit less. There are a lot of unbelievable wines to be had in Bordeaux. It is not stodgy. There's a whole new generation, and it is a place that is really based on farming and land, even though there are glitzy chateaux that are from the 1700s. I hope that you approach it with really great passion like I do, and I'm hoping that you can tell a friend or two about how great Bordeaux is and spread the word, because I think a lot of people do not have the right impression of Bordeaux, so it's up to us to correct it a little bit by making it more normal, if I may say so myself. We are going to talk about Pomerol. If you want to talk about small and meticulous farming, this is it. This is really all about terroir. It has a very long history, but only a history of prestige in maybe the last 100 years, if that. Maybe even in the last 50 or 60 years, if we're really thinking about high-end prestige. But first, of course, I have to thank our patrons. The price of the base tier of Patreon is going up next year from $2 to $3, and from $21.60, which is like I give you a 10% discount if you join for the year, to $30-something. So if you want to join, you can lock in the price in perpetuity for as long as you're a patron. So a lot of people have been joining. I really appreciate you. I want you into the community in whatever way possible. But unfortunately, inflation is pushing the prices up for me also. If you want to get in, please do before the end of the year. Patreon.com/winefornormalpeople. These wonderful people have joined Patreon for the year, and I will give them shout outs. If you join for a year, you get a shout out on this show and my undying gratitude. And hopefully you take part in the hangouts and things like that are coming up. Evan S., Laura C., Alexander M., Terry B., William C., Maggie K., Ryan V., Joanne L., Deborah T., Mitch P., Joe L., Peter K., Caitlin L., Andrew W., Ricky Billy, and Stephen C. I really appreciate it, and I hope that you take advantage of all the community has to offer. All right, let's talk about Pomerol. Pomerol is, hands down, one of the most prestigious high-quality regions of Bordeaux. It is a wine for enthusiasts. The demand almost always exceeds the supply, so it is expensive. It is located on the right bank of Bordeaux in the Libournais. Pomerol is this tiny little town. They have a church. There's houses among the vineyard. There are no grand chateaux. There are no fancy signs. You might not even be able to find a chateau you're looking for. It is one of the smallest areas of top wine production in Bordeaux. It is 0.7% of the total area under vine in Bordeaux at 813 hectares or 2,000 acres and 138 estates. And that's it. It's 3 by 4 kilometers or 2 by 2.5 miles. It's a seventh of the size of Saint-Emilion. It's the same size as Saint-Julien on the left bank. Very small. It is a red wine only appellation, and the wines are mainly Merlot with some Cabernet Franc, some Cabernet Sauvignon, Malbec, and Petit Verdot. Pomerol is unique because of all of the greats, it is the only one that has no classification system. It is not part of any classification, yet almost all the wine is estate bottled. There are no cooperatives here. The decision that the Pomerol Syndicate made is basically that they're going to let the market decide which wines should be priced the way that they should and which wines should fall to the bottom. No classification necessary, and it works really well for them. Because most of the wines are so high quality, and because there are no cooperatives, I'm going to get into a little bit of dorky business here, but 70% of the distribution of Pomerol wines is dealt with by merchants, by négociants. They are not selling direct, and oftentimes they don't have tasting rooms because there's no wine to share. They're keeping it in their library. They're not keeping it to sell to the public. It's an important thing to understand. This is business for them. They're just selling it to the merchants. 40% of Pomerol stays in France. 60% is exported. And the big markets are Germany, the Benelux countries, which is Belgium, the Netherlands, and Luxembourg, Canada, China, Korea, the UK, Switzerland, and the US. As we always do in the greats, history is one of the major components of what makes a wine great, right? What is the legacy? How did it get here? So the history here is that 2 ancient routes cross the plateau of Pomerol, which I will discuss a lot when we start discussing the terroir. We know that 2 ancient routes cross the plateau because the Roman poet Ausonius used to take one of these when he went to the port of Condat near his villa. He mentioned it in his writings. The Romans were clearly the first people to grow vines in what is now Pomerol. The name Pomerol, we're not sure where it comes from. There's speculation that it is Latin for the word poma, which is a fruit that bears seeds, and the origin of the French word pomme for apple. But Pomerol has a long history of polyculture, meaning fruits and grains were grown here long before viticulture became the main focus. So that idea of poma or fruit-bearing seeds or an area that had a lot of agriculture does seem to make sense. One thing we do know is that Pomerol was on the traditional northern route for pilgrims traveling along El Camino to Santiago de Compostela in Galicia in Spain. I've mentioned this a number of times in these Bordeaux podcasts. Pilgrims that are coming from the north make their way through Bordeaux, and they stop here, and they restocked and rested before the difficult journey over the Pyrenees. The pilgrimage actually wound up attracting the interest of a group called the Knights Hospitaliers. And remember, I don't speak French. I don't want to hear how bad my French is. We're just going to go with it, okay? We're going to go with my Americanized version of all of the French. This group were returning crusaders, and they set up hostels and hospitals. The Gazin Hospital was set up in 1288, and today the winery Château Gazin is on the site. The Knights were in the region for several centuries, and the only reason that they really matter, besides the fact that there's a famous chateau now on the site where they had a hospital, is that during the 100 Years' War between the British and the French, 1337 to 1453, this was fought heavily in Bordeaux. In fact, the surrender in 1453 was in Castillon, which is not too far from Saint-Emilion. And viticulture at this point was completely destroyed. The Knights Hospitaliers helped replant the vineyards in Pomerol specifically. It's only a part of what's planted there today, but they were instrumental in, again, rebuilding. A lot of in Pomerol is about things being torn down and rebuilt. In the 15 and 1600s, the Dutch traders were not just draining the marshlands on the left bank, they were also in the right bank that is closer to the Netherlands, or Holland at the time. And the Dutch traders had influence here. So for a few hundred years, they were providing a market in Northern Europe where the merchants of Pomerol shipped the wine overland instead of through the port of Bordeaux. So they didn't have to deal with the English and they could just deal directly with the Dutch. The problem is that there were red grapes planted in Pomerol, and the Dutch always wanted white wines. So Pomerol became a white wine area. In the mid-1700s, they started to transition from wheat and produce to grapes only. They had enough business at this point to do that. And this was a good move because, honestly, it was very hard to grow things on this really poor soil. It's clay, it's gravel, it's sandy, very hard to work land. And by 1761, claret became very popular in England. Those white vineyards were then converted to red, and the main markets were red wine markets, so mainly the UK. At this point, we had Malbec and Cabernet Franc and Merlot being planted. That said, Pomerol still was looked on as a bit of a backwater town. It was never thought that they could make great wines. It was thought they could make meh wines, nothing like too special. When I was reading about this, I thought, gosh, what region right now do we say makes okay wines? Like, could it explode onto the scene? I mean, it's very interesting when you hear about this trajectory. People for a really long time thought, Pomerol, not that great. And now it's like, oh, Pomerol, the best. Interesting just to think about how our historical perception changes, and important to know that what's not great today could be fantastic tomorrow. Anyway, in the 1800s, trade started to take off. Pomerol started to get more of a reputation, and some famed chateaux started. The first two Pomerol wines to grab attention were from La Conseillante and La Avengelle, then Trotanoy, Vieux Château Certain. These chateaux are still around today, and this was in the 1800s. They started to become famed and known. The train from Libourne to Paris was finished in 1853. You guys have heard me say this 100 times. There are so many regions that have benefited from the rail system, and Pomerol is no different because now they had a new market. Everybody on the way to Paris, everybody who was going out of Paris now could receive these wines via rail. Access to new customers, access to people who might like these wines, more opportunities to sell the wines, to get money, to invest in the vineyards, all of that. Phylloxera came in 1869 to Bordeaux, and it destroyed the vineyards just like everywhere else. Still, though, even during the phylloxera epidemic, in 1878, Château Petrus, now we just call it Petrus, but Château Petrus won gold medals at the Universal Exhibition in Paris. That is when that property first exploded onto the scene. Today, one of the most coveted, expensive, and unique wines in the world. Petrus is the name of that wine if you don't know that wine. When they replanted from phylloxera, in the 1890s, Merlot became the dominant grape because they saw how well it did on clay soils. Pomerol got its AOC status in 1936 in that first tranche of AOCs, of Appellation Origine Contrôlée. This is when the system went into effect. Pomerol was one of the first. When the AOC was granted, white grapes were not permitted. Still to this day, the AOC does not allow any white grapes. Will that change? I don't know. There's one or two producers who are starting to grow white grapes. We'll see. In 1943, just to give you a sense of how prestigious these wines started to be, there was a price list that was issued. And Petrus was at the level of second growth from Médoc, which is hilarious because now it blows some of the first growths out of the water in terms of pricing. Others that I just mentioned were in the third growth or fourth growth category, not seen as well esteemed as the first growths at all. And Petrus, their best wine, which was owned by this unbelievably dynamic woman, Madame Lebas. She traveled and presented Petrus and built its reputation. She was so rare for a woman of that time to go out and peddle her wines from her chateau and introduce people to them. And Petrus got status as a result of this wonderful woman. I want to talk about two really huge influences on Pomerol. There's two very important figures and a third family that's very important. The first is Jean-Pierre Moix. Jean-Pierre Moix and his family, his lineage, Christian Moix, and now Jean-Francois Moix. This is an incredibly important name in the world of Pomerol. Jean-Pierre Moix was born in the central French department of Corrèze, which is south of the Limousin forest, west of the Massif Central, the big mountain range in the middle of France. He was born in 1913. He moved with his parents to Saint-Emilion after the Great Depression. They were looking for more opportunity. At this point, the wines of Pomerol and Saint-Emilion were not well recognized. Jean-Pierre was 16 when they moved, and a few years later, he decided he was going to get into the wine business. The right bank, there wasn't a whole lot of action, so he went to set up a négociant business in the city of Bordeaux, but it was way too crowded of a market. So he decided, okay, well, there are good wines in Libourne on the right bank. He opened his négociant business in 1937. If you don't know what a négociant business is, it's basically a middleman. So the chateaux sell their wine to the négociant goes out into the market and finds buyers. The négociant will sell the wine and gets a fee probably on both ends, to be quite honest, from the chateau selling the wine and from the importer buying the wine. They allow the chateau to do what they do best, which is make wine. Jean-Pierre Moix had this very successful business. In 1943, he had the ultimate coup. He was in Libourne, he was successful, and he acquired the exclusive selling rights to Château Petrus, which Madame Lebas had been building forever. So she really appreciated this. Now she had a distributor. He traded mainly in Belgium, then bought more properties. He really was very interested in viticulture. As he did this, Jean-Pierre Moix started to improve the wine style, increase the prestige of Pomerol. So he started out buying Château Lafleur Petrus in 1950. In 1953, he bought Château Trotanoy in Pomerol, very important chateau. In 1961, Madame Lebas, who owned Petrus, died. And by 1969, after slowly acquiring pieces of Petrus, Jean-Pierre Moix took over Petrus and took over the winemaking, which he was particularly interested in. Following that, there were more acquisitions. In 1982, Robert Parker gave an enormous boost to Petrus. It took off. The prices went astronomical. The reputation of Pomerol was solidified. In 1970, his son Christian joined the business. By 1991, he had taken over Petrus, and now Jean-Francois Moix runs it. The Moix style, it's important to contrast this with the next person I'm going to talk about, has more acidity, less hang time, a little bit less new oak. They're looking for a very classical style, allowing the vineyard to show through. With Petrus, that's all you really want. They have had a huge influence in boosting the entire Pomerol AOC. When you think about Pomerol, you should think about Moix. That family is so very important. The other influence, which was more widespread throughout Bordeaux, but definitely needs to be mentioned, is Michel Rolland. Michel Rolland is a very well-known consultant. He was born in Pomerol, actually. At his family estate, Château La Pasteur, he learned about wine. In the 1980s and 90s, his style was to make wines that were great for Robert Parker. He was really good friends with Robert Parker, and he was able to tell wineries how to make wines that would score very big scores from Robert Parker, which would then sell the wines and give them lots of money and investment and all that kind of stuff. Soft, oaky style, lots of new oak, long hang times, which meant higher alcohol, long maceration, so you get some tannin in there. Very much about winemaking, eschewing this tradition of more subtle wines, which the Moix family promotes. That is the influence of Rolland. That was all over Bordeaux. He did sell his family chateau in 2012. The other family that needs to be called out is the Tiempont family, which came from Belgium, and I'll talk about that a little bit later. Now let's talk about the terroir of Pomerol. Pomerol is on the right bank and it's inland. It's not on the Gironde estuary like the Médoc. It's on a plateau. It's not a very high plateau that slopes down towards the Isle Valley. It's at the confluence of the Dordogne River, which runs through the right bank, and another river called the Isle River, which is a tributary to the Dordogne. Officially, Pomerol as an appellation includes parts of 4 villages, Pomerol being one of them. There are 3 other little villages, but mostly it is in Pomerol. To the north, there's something called the Barbon stream. This is a tributary of the Isle River, which is a tributary of the Dordogne. And this stream is interesting. It once separated the regions that spoke the langue d'oil, language which was formerly spoken in central and northern France, from the Languedoc. Right now we know Languedoc, the Languedoc, language formerly spoken in southern France. La Langue de Pomerol, which is a lesser appellation than Pomerol. Do not get confused. When you see La Langue de Pomerol, that's not a brand. It's not a chateau of Pomerol. It is a separate appellation, and it is different from Pomerol. It is on the border in the north. They certainly benefit from it. They do have some great wines in La Langue de Pomerol, but it is not Pomerol. To the east is Saint-Emilion, the satellite of Saint-Emilion, Montagne Saint-Emilion and Saint-Emilion. And in the east is where the most prestigious chateaux are. On the border of Saint-Emilion, you can see Cheval Blanc and Chateau Figeac from the border of Pomerol. To the south and the west is the city of Libourne, and the west goes into the Isle Valley. So we have in the north, La Langue de Pomerol. In the east, Montagne Saint-Emilion. In the south, we have the city. In the west is a valley. We will take a step away from this awesome podcast. Oh my gosh, I just want to drink all the Pomerol in the world right now. And we will talk about a place where you can get Pomerol, which would be Wine Access. Go to wineaccess.com/WFMP and check out their site. They have such an amazing selection of wines from Bordeaux, from California, from all over the world, Australia and South America. And they give you access to things that you can't get locally. Wine Access also has amazing customer service. And if you're interested, you can join the Wine for Normal People Wine Access Wine Club by going to wineaccess.com/normal. It's $150 for a shipment of 6 bottles quarterly. I pick out all the wines. They are excellent quality. I do videos. I write you a letter to tell you why I pick those specific wines. You can go to wineaccess.com/normal to join the wine club, or go to wineaccess.com/WFMP and get into the site. Let them know you found out about them through me. You can either stock up on fantastic wines for the holidays, or you can get a gift card for the wine lover in your life. Wine Access makes it so easy to gift somebody the gift of wine. Wineaccess.com/WFMP to get to the site and get a gift card for the wine lover in your life, or buy a bunch of wines and give them out to the wine lovers in your life. And while you're at it, if you have a special wine lover who is nerdy about wine, you should definitely get them a Wine for Normal People class gift certificate. They're available on winefornormalpeople.com/classes. The classes are very fun. They are extensive, lots of detail. This is for people that really want to learn the details of wine. It's like a live podcast, except we taste wine. There's a great community. We discuss it. The classes are about 2 hours long, tons of detail. They go by pretty fast if you are somebody who really wants to learn about wine. winefornormalpeople.com/classes. Winter Whites, based on the podcast, is coming up, and Sparkling Wine on a Budget. And then I will be renewing the slate of classes for next year. Those will go up soon, and there'll be a bunch of new ones. winefornormalpeople.com/classes. And again, this podcast can't go without the support of patrons. Get in before the price goes up for that base tier. Patreon.com/winefornormalpeople. You will be astonished when you get onto the page and see how much is there. All the back episodes of the podcast, plus thousands of posts from me, weekly discussion questions, the ability to connect with other wine lovers in your region. The patrons on Wine for Normal People are a true community. It's not just something where I push out content every now and then. We know each other. We get together. It's the only way you get to go on trips with me. Patreon.com/winefornormalpeople. And you can also gift a Patreon membership to the wine lover in your life. And now let's get back to the show. The climate as I've talked about before with the right bank, is going to be different from Médoc because we're farther from the sea. So it's more continental. It's a semi-continental climate. There's a bit of maritime influence, but this is more continental. So you have more diurnal temperature swings, day-night temperature swings. During the growing season, this is one of the warmest spots in Bordeaux. It's very early ripening. It's usually the first in Bordeaux to harvest. Sometimes they can avoid the fall rains because of that. Be careful when you see vintage charts and they start talking about all of Bordeaux. Because Pomerol harvests early, if there's rain in other parts of Bordeaux, if the rain is a little bit later, it is very likely that the grapes have already been off the vine and Pomerol is going to offer an excellent vintage, even if other parts are getting gray rot from that rain. Spring frost can be an issue here. A lot of times there's rain in the spring because of this continental environment, and that can be a problem. Coulure, which is when the flowers don't turn into berries, can happen very frequently in Pomerol for some of the vintages, reducing the size of the vintage. In hot vintages, another problem, Merlot does not like warm weather. That's why a lot of the properties on the left bank are switching more to Cabernet Sauvignon. Merlot gets overripe. It's really good in cooler years, though. So again, total different thing that you're looking for in the vintages of Pomerol and Sauvignon for that matter, different from the Médoc. There are three main types of soils in Pomerol. There is clay. Clay is going to produce strong wines with more tannin, more ageability. Then there's gravel, similar to some spots on the left bank, but it's not deep. The gravel doesn't go down as far as it does on the left bank. Elegance, acidity, wines that are complex, kind of minerally from gravel. And then when they grow on sand, they are lighter, but they do have lovely aromatics. Most soils are a combination of the three. It's really hard to find pure soils because there's wind and there's erosion and soils change over time. The best wines grow on what is called the Pomerol Plateau. This is the most opulent wines, the most age-worthy wines, the most expensive wines, the best wines. This is in the northeast area of Pomerol, closer to Saint-Emilion. There's more clay here. That means there's more aging potential. There's more power. Now, that said, there is some variation. The clay, which is from worn down limestone, so it has calcium and minerals and gives these wines extra flavor, creates very robust wines. But there is also gravel and sand here and a combination of them. The really important thing is that in a lot of these areas, there is an iron-rich clay known as crasse de fer. This gives the wine a very distinct aromatic character, a floral character, a strong earth character. This soil is important because the grapes that grow on this have less vigor, they retain moisture in dry years, and they have these beautiful aromas. So not all the wines of Pomerol grow on this subsoil, but those that do are the top wines. The Pomerol Plateau is flat. The elevation is 130 feet or 40 meters. It's a hill. It's not like we're up in Spain where you're at thousands of feet. But at that top level, at the 40 meter, 130 feet level, that's really the pinnacle of quality. The best wines are up at that elevation. As you go down the plateau, you have wines that are a little bit less powerful, maybe a bit simpler. To the extent that there are slopes on some of these hillier areas, south facing is preferred, at least for now, to make sure that the grapes get ripe. I'm going to talk about the Petrus buttonhole. What? Yeah. So here's the deal. This is unlike anything else in this area or in the world. On a hill on the plateau, there is this sticky, blue, dense clay from about 40 million years ago. And the buttonhole is just this circle in the northeast of the Pomerol Plateau. This is totally different soils from anywhere else. It's rich in iron. It has this quality where it expands in the rain and then it retains the water. So in the heat of summer, you still have plenty of moisture for these grapes. The roots can't dig that far down, but it still makes this unbelievable wine. Now, because you do have this rich iron clay, you have higher tannins in the Petrus buttonhole where grapes for this wine grow. The tannins are strong, but they're still softer than the Cabernet Sauvignon growing on the left bank because we're talking about Merlot. The thing about Petrus is that because the grapes grow on this buttonhole, on this really unique soil that no one else has, Petrus stands alone. It is a really singular wine. Nothing else apparently tastes like it. I've never had it. I don't know if I ever will. It's ridiculously expensive. Where we may be able to afford wines is from the terraces in the west and the south. These are different levels of terraces with gravel. The gravel is not as deep, as I said before, as that on the left bank, and there's clay subsoils. Merlot does very, very well here. So does Cabernet Franc. The wines from the terraces are more acidic. They're softer. They're more minerally. They're more elegant, as we call it. So they have more nuance in some ways and less power. That doesn't mean that Petrus is not the best wine in the world or anything like that. It just means that these are a little softer. Château Lafleur, Petrus, parts of Château Trotanoy, La Conseillante, l'Evangile, Vieux Château Certain. These are some of the top chateaux of Pomerol, and they are growing on gravel. And then the third is farther west and south. As the plateau slopes down to the water, the soil is alluvial and sandy, and that's an even lighter style than the gravel soil, less ripe, less age-worthy, great when young, ripens earlier, lovely wines, and those are our more affordable wines when they grow on sand. There's a variety in Pomerol, and there's lots of different ways that Merlot can express itself. And why am I saying Merlot? In particular, 80% of what is grown in Pomerol is Merlot, 15% Cabernet Franc, and 5% Cabernet Sauvignon, according to their syndicate. There are trace amounts of other grapes, Malbec, which is called Pressac here, and Petit Verdot, which was added as an approved grape in 2009, mainly because Christian Moex wanted to use it. If we think about 2009, that means that these grapes are not even 20 years old. In the world of complex flavors, the Petit Verdot is still kind of a baby here. With time, Petit Verdot may play a bigger role. It never plays a huge role in any wine, but it does add some lovely backbone in terms of its tannin structure, and it adds beautiful floral aromatics. So that could add to the Merlot, especially as we see climate change coming, although Petit Verdot does not do well in heat either. I've already talked about after phylloxera, Cabernet Franc was dominant, and then they replanted with Merlot, and Merlot got a second replanting after the frost of 1956. There was an early spring frost in 1956. It killed a huge proportion of the Cabernet Franc plantings, and the growers said Merlot is earlier ripening than Cabernet Franc, and it's higher yielding. So they planted with Merlot even more so in 1956. They planted a lot post-phylloxera, then they planted a lot in 1956. With climate change, though, now we are seeing more Cabernet Franc being planted, because the tannin and the acidity, especially in Cabernet Franc, the natural acidity, are needed to balance some of the fleshiness or the softness of Merlot. Especially as the climate warms, Cabernet Franc is playing a more and more important role. Again, we might see Petit Verdot playing that role as well. This is the great thing about blends. You have an opportunity to change things up and make up for the lack. If Merlot starts lacking structure, you can use Cabernet Franc to take care of that, or Petit Verdot. We don't see wines in Pomerol being 100% Merlot, but they can get up to 95% with Cabernet Franc, or Boucher as they call it here. Usually Cabernet Franc's 5 to 20% of the blend. There are some chateaux that do more Cabernet Franc. No laws about what you can use, just as long as it is Merlot, Cabernet Franc, Cabernet Sauvignon, Malbec, and Petit Verdot. Cabernet Sauvignon is used in some of the estates with gravel, but it is not a preferred grape. It doesn't ripen very well in the cooler soils and the subsoils of Pomerol. So even though it's warm here, it's not quite warm enough for a sustained period of time to get Cabernet Sauvignon to the level of ripeness that it needs. It is used. It may grow eventually, who knows? But for right now, it's just a very small percentage. In general, we see that Merlot is planted on clay. Cabernet Franc is on gravel and sand, as is Cabernet Sauvignon, and Malbec, Petit Verdot also on gravel. One of the secrets to the success of Pomerol is that because these estates are so small, they have meticulous vineyard management. The production is very limited. Everything that they make is high quality in most cases because the winemakers are looking at every step of the viticulture, of the vinification process. They're doing this personally because it's not that much wine. So they are very much involved. They do what is right for Merlot and for their clay soils. They do not adopt left bank techniques, which for a very long time they did. And they realized this is a completely different area of Bordeaux. We need to do things differently. We need to vinify differently. They've got lower planting densities. They have different planting techniques. They do different things in Pomerol versus the left bank, where the densities are 10,000 vines per hectare versus 8,000 in Pomerol. It's just different depending on what's right for the grape. In winemaking, the Appellation Origine Contrôlée document says the density has to be at least 5,000 vines per hectare, although they do 8,000. It mandates the grape varieties, like I talked about. The wine can't be released until the 1st November of the year following harvest, so they want it to sit for about a year. But the style has evolved. When we talk about winemaking, like I said, they moved away from what the left bank specialists were saying. Things improved in the 1980s. They use a lot of French oak. Winemakers adapt it to each vintage. Some of them use 100% new French oak. Some of them use very small percentages of French oak. It just depends on your winemaking style and also what the vintage has brought you. But in general, when we talk about Pomerol, we are talking about wines that are balanced and they taste like plum and black cherry wrapped up in silk. They are like velvet and they've got earthy. Sometimes they're a little bit meaty. They're like mushrooms, dark chocolate, leather, usually a subtle oak influence because they're trying to express the terroir. So they're not going over the top with the oak or the toast of the oak, even if it's new. It doesn't have super high acidity, nor does it have harsh tannins. It's just rich and velvety. It doesn't have the black currant flavor or the tannin of the Médoc wines. And it also requires less aging, usually 8 to 10 years. But the best can definitely live for 50 years, just like the left bank wines. Amazing wine. It is so silky and voluptuous. I love Pomerol. It's like pure enjoyment. It's so hedonistic. You just sit there drinking it and think, I'm so lucky and I get to have this hedonistic pleasure. Who wouldn't want that? Pairings, I mean, we're looking at roasted chicken and anything with mushrooms and truffles, earthy dishes. You can have it with ahi tuna. You can have it with salmon. You can have it with beef, but it can't be too heavy because we've got less structure, less tannin with these wines. So you want to have something more on the lighter side of meat or earthy vegetables, dishes like that. Best vintages for Pomerol, I'm talking about how important vintage is. 2009 and 2010, great for all of Bordeaux. 15 and 16, another great duo of years. And then 2018, 2019, 2020, and 2022 were all excellent vintages for Pomerol. So if you're looking at buying one or investing in one, those are the years to look at. I'm going to talk about the top chateau just to give you a sense for how they're different. Petrus, I've already talked about. It's just 12 hectares or 30 acres. It is a MOEX property, 30,000 bottles per year. That's it. It's not the oldest chateau. Wasn't even the most well-known until it was the first Pomerol estate to win a gold medal at the Universal Exposition in Paris in 1878. It was recognized locally for excellence until Madame Laubach went out and presented her Petrus. She was, as I said before, a really unusual woman. Jean-Pierre Moex took full control in 1969. The wines really took off in the 80s. Petrus is 100% Merlot. I have never had Petrus because a bottle of even a not great vintage is $3,200. In a good vintage, it's about $5,000. Because of that, we're going to have to trust Jane Anson, the author of Inside Bordeaux, this amazing book that has great detail on Bordeaux. She's the foremost Bordeaux expert and a good friend. I adore her. Bergamot, olives, cassis, grilled rosemary in a silky texture. It can age beautifully. It's all about pleasure, and no other wine compares. Sign me up, please, but not for $3,000 a bottle. Sorry, in a bad vintage. Le Pin, another cult wine. The production is even smaller at Le Pin than it is at Petrus. It started actually in 1979 by the Tiampont family. I said that they were important, the Belgian owners. They had a history of bottling Bordeaux wine in Belgium. Another branch of the Tiampont family came in 1924. In 1979, the Tiampont family bought 1 hectare from Madame Labatte's children. It was very expensive. 1 hectare, that's 2.5 acres. In 1987, Jacques Tiampon took over. He named the wine Le Pin for a pine tree that was near the winery. He had some help from Michel Rolland and his wife. He acquired a few more vines, bumped that 1 hectare up to 2.7 hectares or 7 acres. They make about 6,000 bottles. The soils here are sandy gravel topsoil over very deep gravel, which is not characteristic for Pomerol. So this is rare. There's great drainage on this small little plot. Even in wet years, Le Pin is extremely consistent because the water is draining out through this deep gravel bank. It's aged entirely in new oak for 2 years. A bottle of Le Pin, even in a bad year, like 2017, not a fantastic year, $4,300, $5,000. These are the prices for Le Pin. So, of course, I've never had it. And Jane Anson, once again, says it's velvet with really rich floral aromatics. That's the trademark of Le Pin. Also 100% Merlot. Château Lafleur, right next to Petrus, totally different soils, really different wines. They have sandy clay gravel and gravelly sand. They're putting Merlot on the clay gravel, and on that gravelly sand, they'll put Cabernet Franc and they'll put the other grapes. But clay will provide power to the Merlot, more tannins, more richness, more fruit, more age-worthiness. They use the lowest proportion of new oak anywhere in Bordeaux, 20% new oak. It needs time to open. They use more Cab Franc, so it has more of the graphite note. This chateau has been around since the 1400s, and Château Lafleur goes for a lot less than those other wines. It is still $600 a bottle. Some are $900, some are over $1,000. So that's Château Lafleur. Château Trotanoy, very classic Pomerol. Jean-Pierre Moix bought it in 1953. It's been passed down. This wine has a lot of silky fruit, graphite licorice, blackberry. Jane Anson says this is one of her favorite wines. Half is on black clay. The other half is on gravel over clay. The wine is extremely consistent. Another one that's on top of the plateau. The wine is pretty tannic, 88% Merlot, 12% Cabernet Franc. Those wines are total steal at $450 a bottle, or there's some prices that are $400 a bottle, $350 a bottle. And then you have Vieux Château Certain, VCC is what they call it. A Scottish family actually started this in the 1940s. The Tiampon family bought it. They're only the third owners of Vieux Château Certain, VCC. They have a lot of heavy clay. 80% Merlot, 20% Cabernet Franc, and 5% Cabernet Sauvignon. They are also at elevation, another really classic wine. At VCC, total steal at between $200 and $350, depending on where you get it. VCC is often considered one of the top wines, and it is a lot less expensive than some of these others. La Conseillante, owned by the same family since 1871. Consistent wines. They can be kind of big. Michel Rolland was a consultant here. 60% clay, 40% gravel over that iron-rich clay, 75% new oak. And these wines go for around $250 also. Expensive, but a little bit more doable. And L'Evangile is the last one. The reason I mention this, it is owned by the Rothschild family, the family branch that owns Lafite Rothschild. It is near La Conseillante and Cheval Blanc in Saint-Emilion, gravel soils over heavy clay, 80% Merlot, 20% Cabernet Franc. Sometimes they do 100% new oak, L'Evangile, about the same price. So it ranges, depending on the vintage, from about $200 to about $260. Again, these are the top chateau of Pomerol. Even for regular basic Pomerol, you are going to be paying at least between $30 and $40. They are expensive, but I will tell you, it is worth it to splurge, even if just once. These wines are beautiful. They are silky. If you want to treat yourself and see what a wine that makes you think, but at the same time gives you so much pleasure, it is so enjoyable. You can have it with somebody that knows very little about wine, and they will still enjoy and appreciate these wines. Because the combination of terroir, the grapes that are used, the winemaking technique and the care that the people in Pomerol put into the wines makes these wines so special. I never feel guilty when I splurge on a Pomerol. I am always happy after I drink it that I bought it. I don't know, you have to decide if it's worth it, but maybe you can chip in with a few friends and get a bottle of this. It's just pure wine pleasure. That's all I can say about Pomerol. Get yourself a bottle, report back about what you think. I think it would be hard to have a bottle of Pomerol and not think, oh my gosh, this is like liquid velvet, unless it was really bad. But like I said, hard to get a bad Pomerol. So at least you know if you're going to spend the money, it's going to go pretty well. That is Pomerol. And that is the end of our Bordeaux series, sadly. I think I'm going to teach a class on the Greats of Bordeaux. It will probably be a two-part class, one that explores the left bank and one that explores the right bank. It may even be a three-part class. I don't know. I am forming the idea now, but I know that there's been a lot of interest. And although these wines are pricier, the learning and the ability to try them side by side, really a great opportunity. For those of you who are interested in that, make sure that you look out for that on winefornormalpeople.com/classes. And with that, this has been another episode of Wine for Normal People. Thank you so much for listening, and we will catch you next time.